I never thought I'd end up pinned against my garage door by 3 women screaming about paint colors while security cameras captured everything. But Karen's face when the police arrived with those warrants? That made every second worth it. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 42 years old. I've lived in Meadowbrook Heights for 7 years now, ever since my divorce left me needing a fresh start. I'm a high school English teacher, which means I have summers off to actually enjoy my house and garden. That's all I'm on, Tita. Peaceful place to raise my daughter, Emma, who just turned 16. Meadowbrook Heights seemed perfect when I bought my 3-bedroom colonial back in 2018. The neighborhood had tree-lined streets, well-maintained lawns, and friendly neighbors. The HOA fees were $250 per quarter, which seemed reasonable for the amenities of community pool, playground, and maintained property values. For the first few years, everything was fine. Barbara Chun was our HOA president, and she was wonderful. She's a retired architect in her early 60s, with short silver hair and warm brown eyes behind purple-framed glasses. Barbara actually cared about the community. She organized neighborhood barbecues, helped new families feel welcome, and only enforced rules when absolutely necessary. Then everything changed in March of 2023. That's when Karen Whitmore moved into the massive house at the end of Oakmont Drive. Karen bought the house for $575,000 and immediately started making waves. Karen is in her late 40s, tall and thin with bleached blonde hair styled in an aggressive bob. She has sharp features and cold blue eyes that never seem to blink. She dresses like she's attending a board meeting even when just walking her designer poodle named Duchess. Within weeks, Karen started attending HOA meetings with a leather portfolio full of complaints. She criticized neighbors for leaving garbage bins visible too long. She demanded stricter lawn maintenance enforcement. She even tried to ban children's chalk drawings on sidewalks, claiming they diminished property values. Barbara handled her diplomatically at first, explaining our HOA focused on real issues, not petty grievances. This drove Karen crazy. I first encountered Karen's vindictiveness in June of 2023. I'd planted a small vegetable garden in my front yard, peppers and herbs in raised beds. I'd checked the bylaws carefully. Gardens were allowed as long as they were maintained and didn't exceed 20% of front yard space. I was kneeling in my garden one Saturday morning, pulling weeds around my tomato plants. Emma was inside doing homework. The morning sun felt wonderful. "Excuse me?" A sharp voice cut through my peace. Karen stood at the edge of my lawn. Arms crossed, she wore white linen pants and a crisp blue blouse, despite it being barely 9 in the morning. "Can I help you?" I asked. "That garden is a violation," Karen announced, pointing at my raised beds. Like they were toxic waste. This is a residential neighborhood, not a farm. I stood up slowly. Actually, I checked the bylaws. Gardens are specifically allowed. "They're an eyesore," Karen interrupted. "They attract pests and lower property values. I'm filing a complaint with the HOA. You're welcome to file whatever you want." Primera Said calmly. "But I'm not violating any rules." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that." She marched away with her poodle. 2 days later, I received a formal violation notice. It claimed my garden violated Section 7, subsection C, regarding unsightly structures. The fine was $100, due within 30 days. I was furious. I pulled out my bylaws and reread Section 7. Subsection C, it referred to storage sheds, not gardens. Someone had deliberately misapplied the rule. That evening, I drove to Barbara's house on Maple Street. She lived in a charming craftsman with a beautiful rock garden. Barbara answered in casual clothes, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Sarah, come in," she said warmly. We sat in her sunroom overlooking her backyard. I handed her the violation notice. Barbara's face darkened as she read it. "This is ridiculous. Your garden doesn't violate anything." So looked up. "Karen's been pushing for this. She brought it up at the last board meeting." "Can she do this?" I asked. Barbara sighed. "Technically, as a board member, she can file complaints. But this is baseless." She set the notice down. "I'll handle this, Sarah. Don't pay that fine. I'll bring this to the full board and get it dismissed. Karen's on the board? My stomach dropped. As of last month, Barbara said grimly. She ran unopposed for the vacant secretary position. I couldn't legally prevent her from joining. She patted my hand. Don't worry, the board isn't just Karen. We have 5 members, and the others are reasonable. The following week, Barbara called to tell me the board had voted 4-1 to dismiss the violation. Only Karen voted to uphold it. My garden was safe. But Karen wasn't finished. Over the next months, I received 3 more violation notices. One claimed my mailbox was improperly maintained because of a small scratch. Another said my trash bins were visible from the street of N, though I'd brought them in within the allowed time frame. The third claimed my house numbers weren't clearly visible, despite being perfectly legible. Each time, Barbara helped me fight them. Each time, they were dismissed. And that time Karen's hostility grew more obvious. I wasn't her only target. Karen filed complaints against at least 7 other families. The Rodriguezes got cited for their children's basketball hoop. The Patels were accused of having too many cars when their son's college friends visited. Old Mr. Henderson was cited for his lawn being a 1/4 inch too long. The neighborhood was becoming tense. People who'd been friendly for years started arguing at HOA meetings. Karen had created an atmosphere of suspicion and pet. In November of 2023, things escalated dramatically. Barbara called an emergency HOA meeting to address growing complaints about Karen's enforcement tactics. The meeting was held at the community center on a cold Tuesday evening. Nearly 50 residents showed up, an unprecedented turnout. I sat with the Rodriguezes toward the middle of the room. The tension was palpable. Karen sat in the front row with her portfolio, looking smugly confident. Barbara stood at the podium in her red blazer, looking tired but determined. "Thank you all for coming," Barbara began. "I know many of you have concerns about recent HOA enforcement actions. I want to address point of order." Karen stood up abruptly. "Before we begin, I have a motion to present." Barbara's jaw tightened. "Karen, this isn't the time. According to our bylaws, any board member can present motions at any meeting," Karen said smoothly. She turned to face the room. "I move for a vote of no confidence in Barbara Chun as HOA president." Gasps echoed through the room. Barbara's face went pale. "On what grounds?" demanded Bill Rodriguez, standing up angrily. Karen smiled coldly. "Mismanagement of HOA funds, failure to enforce community standards, and abuse of authority." She pulled papers from her portfolio. "I have documentation of numerous violations that Barbara has dismissed without proper board votes." "That's a lie," I shouted, jumping to my feet. Others joined in, voices rising in anger. Barbara raised her hands, calling for calm. "Everyone, please. Let's handle this properly." She looked at Karen with cold fury. "Karen, those are serious accusations. Do you have actual evidence?" "I have records of every violation you've dismissed," Karen said. 27 in the past 8 months. You've been running this HOA like your personal fiefdom, playing favorites. The room erupted in arguments. Some defended Barbara, others, newer residents, looked uncertain. "The violations were dismissed by board vote," Barbara said firmly. "Everything was done according to procedure." "Votes you manipulated," Karen shot back. "I'm calling for a special election. The residents deserve leadership that actually enforces our standards." My hands shook with rage. I knew exactly what Karen was doing. She wanted Barbara's position. The meeting descended into chaos. Barbara tried to maintain order, but people were too angry. Finally, she called for a vote on Karen's motion. According to bylaws, a vote of no confidence required a 2/3 majority of board members present. We had all 5 board members. They're Barbara, Karen, Mike Stevens, Linda Park, and James Wilson. Karen voted yes. Mike and Linda voted no. Supporting Barbara, that left James Wilson, a quiet accountant who joined the board only 3 months earlier. James stood slowly, looking uncomfortable. I think we need to take these accusations seriously," he said quietly. "I vote yes to no. Barbara, as president, cast the tie-breaking vote voting no. The motion failed, 3-2. But the damage was done. Karen had planted seeds of doubt. As people filed out, I heard whispered conversations questioning Barbara's leadership. I caught up with Barbara in the parking lot. She stood by her silver sedan, looking defeated. "Barbara," I said gently. She turned, tears in her eyes. "7 years I've served this community," she said quietly. "And now half the neighborhood thinks I'm corrupt." "Everyone who knows you knows the truth," I told her. "But not everyone knows me anymore," Barbara said. "Half these residents moved in within the last 2 years. They don't remember what this neighborhood was like before Karen." She wiped her eyes. "I'm 63 years old. Maybe it's time to step down." "Don't let her win," I said fiercely. "That's exactly what Karen wants." Barbara smiled sadly. "Sometimes winning means knowing when to walk away." She got in her car and drove off. Over the next weeks, Karen's campaign intensified. But now she wasn't just targeting individuals. She was targeting Barbara directly. Karen started a neighborhood Facebook group called Meadowbrook Heights Community Concerns. She posted carefully worded criticisms of Barbara's leadership, always phrased as questions or concerns. She highlighted every minor maintenance issue, implying mismanagement. Many residents, especially newer ones, joined the group. Karen's posts were persuasive if you didn't know the full context. She made Barbara sound incompetent and possibly corrupt. In January of 2024, Karen filed a formal complaint with the state HOA regulatory board, claiming Barbara had misused community funds. The investigation would take months. I watched Barbara slowly crumble under the pressure. She looked exhausted at every meeting. The joy she'd once taken in community service was gone. Then came February 14th, Valentine's Day. I'll never forget that date. I came home from teaching to find Emma standing in our driveway, staring at our house with wide eyes. "Mom," she said shakily, pointing. Our house had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted violation in huge red letters across our garage door. My vegetable garden had been torn, upraised, beds kicked over, soil scattered everywhere. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "I called the police," Emma said, her voice small. "They're on their way." I pulled her into a hug, my hands shaking. "Were you home when this happened?" "No, I just got home from Kayla's house 10 minutes ago." 2 police officers arrived within 20 minutes. They took photos, asked questions, and filed a report. Without witnesses or camera footage, there wasn't much they could do. "I'd recommend installing security cameras," one officer suggested. After they left, Emma and I stood in our driveway, looking at the destruction. "It was her, wasn't it?" Emma asked quietly. "That Karen woman." "I can't prove it," I said, but I knew in my bones it was true. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying months of harassment, the violation notices, the attacks on Barbara, the vandalism. Something inside me snapped. I'd spent months being reactive, defending myself, defending Barbara, responding to Karen's attacks. I'd been playing defense while Karen controlled the game. It was time to fight back. The next morning, I called Barbara. "I need to see the HOA financial records," I said. "All of them." "Sarah, what are you thinking?" Barbara asked cautiously. "Karen's been accusing you of financial mismanagement," I said, "but I'm wondering if that's projection. I want to see if Karen's hiding something." There was a long pause. Then Barbara said, "Come over this afternoon. I'll show you everything." That afternoon, I sat at Barbara's dining room table, surrounded by 3 years of HOA, financial records, bank statements, receipts, expense reports, everything. Barbara walked me through it all. Every dollar was accounted for. Her record-keeping was meticulous. But as I reviewed documents from the past year, something caught my eye. "Barbara," I said slowly, "who approves community maintenance contracts?" "The board votes on contracts over $500, she said. "Smaller expenses I can approve as president." I pointed to a series of payments to Premium Landscape Services, 4 payments of $475 each, over 6 months. Just under the threshold requiring board approval. Do you remember approving these? I asked. Barbara frowned, pulling the documents closer. Premium landscape services. We use Greenview Landscaping. We have 4 years. My heart started racing. These payments are all signed by ... I checked the approval signatures. Karen Whitmore, board secretary. Barbara's eyes widened. That's not right. Karen shouldn't be approving payments without my knowledge. Unless she's been paying a company that doesn't exist, I said quietly. Barbara, I think Karen's been embezzling HOA funds. The room went silent, except for the ticking of Barbara's clock. If that's true, ... double. Quotes Barbara's voice shook Sarah. That's fraud. That's criminal. We need proof before we accuse her, I said. But if we can prove it, ... we bring her down. Barbara finished, and for the first time in months, I saw fire in her eyes. We spent the rest of that afternoon digging deeper. We found 8 suspicious payments over 6 months, totaling $3,800, all to Premium Landscape Services, all approved by Karen alone. Barbara called Greenview Landscaping. They confirmed they were still our exclusive contractors. They'd never heard of Premium Landscape Services. I'm calling an emergency board meeting, Barbara said, reaching for her phone. But I grabbed her hand. Wait. If we tip Karen off, she'll cover her tracks. We need more proof first. What do you suggest? Barbara asked. I thought for a moment. Let me do some research. Give me 3 days. Over the next 3 days, I became an amateur detective. I used my teacher's library access to search business databases. I searched for Premium Landscape Services. The company existed on paper. Registered 8 months earlier. The listed owner was Patricia Whitmore. I felt electricity run through me. Whitmore, Karen's last name. More research revealed Patricia Whitmore was Karen's sister. She lived in another state and worked as a dental hygienist. She definitely wasn't running a landscaping company. Karen had created a fake company using her sister's name to funnel HOA money to herself. I documented everything: screenshots, registration records, payment timeline. I created a complete dossier. On the 3rd day, I went back to Barbara's house and laid out everything I'd found. Barbara stared at the evidence, her face pale. This is worse than we thought. She's been stealing from every family in this neighborhood. And blaming you to cover her tracks, I added. That complaint she filed with the state. She was trying to make you the scapegoat before anyone discovered what she was doing. Barbara's hands clenched into fists. We're going to the police. Wait, I said. If we go now, Karen might claim it's a misunderstanding. We need her caught red-handed. Barbara looked at me carefully. What do you have in mind? I leaned forward. The quarterly board meeting is in 4 days. What if we set a trap? Barbara's eyes lit up. We propose a project requiring payment to Premium Landscape Services. Exactly. And when Karen approves it without question, we reveal we know it's fake, in front of the entire board and all the residents. That's risky, Barbara said. She won't suspect anything, I said. She thinks she's already won. Her guard is down. Barbara sat back, thinking. Then she smiled, not her usual warm smile, but something sharper. All right, let's do it. Will their trap work? What will happen when they confront Karen in front of the entire community? The next 4 days felt like the longest of my life. Barbara and I met secretly every evening to plan every detail of our trap. We couldn't risk anyone finding out, especially not the other board members. If word got back to Karen, our entire plan would collapse. We decided to propose a spring beautification project for the community entrance: new plants, fresh mulch, decorative stones. The project would cost exactly $475, the same amount as Karen's previous fraudulent payments. And we'd specify it be done by Premium Landscape Services. She approved it without thinking, I said during one of our planning sessions. She's gotten away with it 8 times already. She'll think this is just another easy score. Barbara nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. What if she suspects something? What if she's more careful this time? She won't be, I assured her. People like Karen get overconfident. She thinks she's untouchable now. She thinks she's won. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept running through everything that could go wrong. What if Karen didn't take the bait? What if she had some explanation we hadn't considered? What if she somehow turned this around on us? Emma noticed my anxiety at breakfast. Mom, you look terrible. Are you okay? Just nervous about something at the HOA meeting tonight, I admitted. Emma squeezed my hand. You've got this. Karen's going down. I smiled at my daughter's confidence. When did you get so fierce? I learned from you, she said simply. Finally, the day arrived, February 22nd, 2024. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for 7 o'clock at the community center. These meetings typically attracted 20 to 30 residents. Tonight, word had spread about ongoing tensions, and nearly 60 people showed up. The community center was packed, with people standing along the walls. I arrived 15 minutes early, with my folder of evidence hidden in my bag. My hands were sweating. Emma sat beside me. She'd insisted on coming despite my concerns. I want to see this, she'd said firmly. Karen arrived exactly on time, wearing a burgundy suit, her hair perfect, her expression confident bordering on smug. She took her seat at the board table, arranging her leather portfolio with precise movements. Barbara arrived 2 minutes later, in her red blazer, carrying a simple folder. She looked calm, but I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she set down her notes. The other board members filed in: Mike Stevens, Linda Park, and James Wilson. They looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Barbara called the meeting to order at exactly 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our first quarterly meeting of 2024. The meeting started with standard business approval of previous minutes, treasurer's report, upcoming community events. Everything proceeded normally for the first 45 minutes. My heart pounded harder with each passing minute. Then Barbara reached the final agenda item. Last item tonight, a proposal for spring beautification of our community entrance. She distributed copies of the proposal to the other board members. I've prepared specifications for new plantings and decorative elements. The estimated cost is $475. I watched Karen carefully. She glanced at the proposal, her expression showing nothing unusual. Perfect. This work would be performed by Premium Landscape Services, Barbara continued smoothly. The timeline would be mid-March, weather permitting. I'd like to open the floor for discussion. Mike Stevens spoke first. This looks nice, but don't we usually use Greenview Landscaping? Why are we changing companies? My heart hammered in my chest. This was the moment Barbara looked directly at Karen. Actually, I was hoping our secretary could explain. Karen, you've approved several payments to Premium Landscape Services over the past months. I assume you're familiar with their work. The room went very quiet. I saw Karen's posture stiffen almost Yes, Karen said carefully. They've done satisfactory work on various maintenance projects. What projects, specifically? Barbara asked, her voice perfectly neutral. Karen hesitated for just a second, but it was enough. General maintenance items, various landscaping touch-ups around the community. That's interesting, Barbara said, because I've reviewed our maintenance logs, and I don't see any record of these landscaping touch-ups you're describing. Karen's eyes narrowed dangerously. Are you questioning my approval of legitimate business expenses? I'm asking for clarification on payments totaling $3,800 that appear to have been made without proper documentation or board oversight, Barbara said. Then she dropped the hammer, especially since Premium Landscape Services appears to be owned by Patricia Witt. That wouldn't happen to be your sister Patricia, would it, Karen? The room exploded. Karen's face went white, then bright red. How dare you? This is absolutely outrageous, I demand. But Barbara wasn't finished. She opened her folder and pulled out copies of everything I'd discovered: the business registration, showing Patricia Whitmore as owner, the payment records, screenshots proving Patricia was Karen's sister and worked as a dental hygienist in Nevada. I've documented 8 unauthorized payments to this company over 6 months, Barbara said, her voice cutting through the chaos. $3,800 of community funds paid to a company owned by your sister, who lives in Nevada and works as a dental hygienist. Would you care to explain how she's been performing landscape services in our neighborhood? Karen stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is a witch hunt. You're making wild accusations because I've been holding you accountable for your mismanagement. The only thing wild here is your fraud, I called out, standing up. Everyone turned to look at me. You've been stealing from every family in this neighborhood while accusing Barbara of the exact crime you've been committing yourself. You. Karen whirled on me, her face twisted with pure rage. This is your doing. You've been out to get me from the beginning with your pathetic little garden. My garden that you vandalized. I shot back. My house that you spray-painted with threats. I never you have no proof of anything, actually. Barbara interrupted calmly. Sarah installed security cameras after the vandalism, and those cameras captured something very interesting last week. This was our calculated bluff. My cameras hadn't captured anything yet today, only installed them 3 days ago. But Karen didn't know that. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish, gasping for air. This meeting is over, she announced, grabbing a portfolio with shaking hands. I'm reporting this harassment to the authorities. You're not reporting anything, Barbara said firmly, because I've already contacted the police about the fraudulent payments. They're investigating as we speak, and I believe they'll be very interested in discussing the vandalism with you as well. This part was true. Barbara had called the police that afternoon. With all our evidence, Karen stared at Barbara, and I saw something crack in her carefully constructed facade. For the first time since moving to our neighborhood, Karen looked genuinely afraid. Then she did exactly what we'd hoped she wouldn't. She ran. Karen grabbed her bag and bolted for the exit. People jumped out of her way as she rushed toward the door. But she didn't get far. 2 police officers entered the community center just as Karen reached the exit. Barbara had arranged for them to wait outside, listening to the proceedings. Karen Whitmore, the taller officer said calmly, we have some questions about fraudulent financial transactions. We need you to come with us. The look on Karen's face, shock, fury, and terror all mixed together, was something I'll never forget. Her carefully constructed image of control and superiority shattered in an instant. I want my lawyer, Karen said, her voice shaking. I'm not saying anything without my lawyer present. That's your right, the officer said. But you're still coming with us to answer questions. As the officers escorted Karen out, not in handcuffs yet, but clearly not free to leave the room, erupted in conversation. Some people cheered. Others sat in stunned silence. A few looked angry that they'd been fooled by Karen for so long. Barbara raised her hands, calling for order. Everyone, please. I know this is shocking, but we need to proceed properly. The police are investigating the financial irregularities. In the meantime, the board will conduct our own internal audit of all HOA finances to ensure everything else is in order. Mike Stevens stood up, looking pale. Barbara, I owe you an enormous apology. We all do. Karen had us all questioning you, and we should have known better. Linda Park nodded vigorously. I'm so sorry, Barbara. You've served this community faithfully for 7 years, and we let Karen poison our minds against you. Even James Wilson, who'd voted against Barbara at the previous meeting, stood up shakily. I was wrong to doubt you. I'm sorry. Barbara's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Thank you, all of you. This has been a difficult time, but the truth has come out. That's what matters. The meeting officially adjourned 20 minutes later. People crowded around Barbara, offering apologies and support. Several neighbors approached me as well, thanking me for investigating and helping expose Karen's fraud. Bill Rodriguez shook my hand firmly. You did good, Sarah. That took courage. I just wanted the truth to come out, I said. Emma hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Mom. As we drove home that night, I felt exhausted, but relieved. We'd won. Karen was facing criminal charges. Barbara's reputation was restored. The neighborhood could finally heal. But I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing with notifications. The neighborhood Facebook group Karen had created, Meadowbrook Heights Community Concerns, had exploded overnight with activity. Most posts supported Barbara and expressed shock at Karen's fraud. But there was a small, vocal minority defending Karen, claiming she was being framed, that this was all a setup orchestrated by Barbara and me. One post from a woman named Jennifer Davies read, "This seems very convenient. Barbara was under investigation for mismanagement, and suddenly Karen is accused of fraud. I'm not saying Karen is innocent, but doesn't this timing seem suspicious to anyone else?" Several people had liked and commented in agreement. I felt my blood pressure rising. Even with evidence, even after being caught red-handed, Karen still had defenders spreading doubt. I called Barbara. "Have you seen the Facebook group?" "I have," Barbara said, sounding tired. "Let them talk, Sarah. The police have the evidence. The truth will come out fully during the investigation and any trial." "But people are still defending her," I protested. "Some people will always believe what they want to believe," Barbara said gently. "We can't control that. We did the right thing, and that's what matters." Over the next week, more details emerged. The police investigation revealed that Karen's fraud was even more extensive than we'd discovered. She'd been embezzling HOA funds for nearly 8 months, not 6. The total amount stolen was over $5,000. They also found evidence linking Karen to my vandalism. A neighbor's security camera we didn't know about had captured footage of Karen's distinctive white Mercedes parked near my house the evening of February 14th. The police obtained a warrant to search Karen's garage and found a can of red spray paint matching the paint used on my garage door. But that wasn't all they found. During the search, police discovered Karen had been planning something far worse. They found detailed notes about Barbara's daily routines, places she frequented, her home address. Karen had been surveilling Barbara for weeks. Most disturbing, they found drafts of emails Karen had been preparing to send to the state HOA regulatory board, the local newspaper, and other organizations. These emails contained elaborate false accusations against Barbara, claims of embezzlement, fraud, even forged documents proving Barbara had stolen tens of thousands of dollars. Karen hadn't just been trying to force Barbara out of the HOA presidency. She'd been planning to destroy Barbara's reputation completely, possibly even get her arrested on false charges. When Barbara called to tell me about this discovery, her voice shook. "Sarah, if we hadn't exposed her when we did, I can't imagine what she would have done." "But we did expose her," I said firmly. "She's finished, Barbara. She can't hurt you or anyone else now." Karen was formally arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and vandalism. The arraignment was scheduled for March 5th. Bail was set at $25,000, which Karen posted immediately through a bail bondsman. The HOA held an emergency meeting to address the financial losses and next steps. We voted unanimously to pursue civil action against Karen to recover the stolen funds plus damages. We also voted to file a complaint with the state HOA regulatory board about Karen's conduct. Barbara stood before the packed community center and made an announcement. "I want to thank everyone for your support during this difficult time. I also want to address the investigation that was launched against me. The state regulatory board has completed their review and found no evidence of any financial mismanagement or improper conduct on my part. All charges have been dropped, and my record has been cleared." The room erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering. Barbara's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy. After the meeting, many neighbors approached Barbara to apologize for ever doubting her. She graciously accepted every apology, though I could see the emotional toll everything had taken on her. As March progressed, life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly began returning to normal. The tension that had gripped our neighborhood for months started to ease. People were friendlier again. Children played in the streets without their parents worrying about violation notices. The community felt like a community again. I replanted my vegetable garden, which had been destroyed during the vandalism. Neighbors stopped by to help, bringing plants and offering advice. It became a neighborhood project. bringing people together. Em and I worked in the garden one Saturday afternoon when Barbara stopped by with a tray of lemonade. "I thought you ladies might be thirsty," she said, smiling. We took a break, sitting on my front porch steps and sipping lemonade in the spring sunshine. "How are you doing, Barbara?" I asked. "Really?" Barbara was quiet for a moment. "I'm okay. It's been hard. I won't lie. Having people doubt me, question my integrity after 7 years of service. That hurt deeply." She paused. "But having people like you fight for the truth, that meant everything. You would have done the same for any of us," I said. "Maybe," Barbara said, "but not everyone would have done what you did investigating, gathering evidence, putting yourself at risk. You saved this community, Sarah, and you saved me." I felt my eyes getting misty. "We saved each other." Emma looked at both of us and rolled her eyes affectionately. "You're both heroes. Now, can we please finish planting these tomatoes before they die?" We laughed and went back to work, enjoying the peaceful afternoon. But peace, I was learning, could be fragile. On March 20th, 2 weeks before Karen's trial was set to begin, something happened that changed everything again. I was at school, teaching my third-period English class, when my phone buzzed with an emergency alert. I normally kept my phone silenced during class, but something made me check it. It was a text from Barbara. "Sarah, call me immediately. Emergency." My stomach dropped. I asked my student teacher to take over the class and stepped into the hallway to call Barbara. She answered on the first ring. "Sarah, thank God. Karen's bail has been revoked." "What? Why?" "She violated her bail conditions," Barbara said, her voice tight with stress. "She was caught near my house last night. A neighbor reported seeing someone matching her description in my backyard around midnight. Police responded and found Karen hiding in my garden shed." My blood ran cold. "What was she doing there?" "They don't know yet," Barbara said, "but they found her carrying a bag with duct tape, rope, and ... Her voice broke. "And a knife, Sarah. The police think she was planning to hurt me." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Oh my God, Barbara. Are you okay?" "Where are you now?" "I'm at the police station giving a statement," Barbara said. "They've arrested Karen again. This time they're charging her with attempted assault, trespassing, and violating bail conditions. The detective told me she won't be getting bail again." "I'm coming there right now," I said. "No, finish your school day," Barbara insisted. "I'm safe. The police are taking this very seriously. I just wanted you to know what happened." After we hung up, I stood in the hallway, shaking. Karen hadn't just been planning to destroy Barbara's reputation. She'd apparently been planning something much worse. That evening, I went to Barbara's house. A police car was parked in her driveway. The police had assigned someone to watch her house until Karen's trial concluded. Barbara looked exhausted but unharmed. We sat in her living room, drinking tea with shaking hands. "I can't believe she was actually in my backyard," Barbara said quietly. "If that neighbor hadn't seen her and called the police... ... Don't think about that. Primera Saeed firmly, she was caught. She's locked up. She can't hurt you." "I know," Barbara said. "But Sarah, I keep thinking, what if we hadn't exposed her at that meeting? What if she'd successfully framed me for embezzlement? She would have been free to do whatever she wanted, and I might have been the one facing criminal charges. But that didn't happen." I reminded her. "We stopped her. And now she's facing even more serious charges." Barbara nodded slowly. "The prosecutor called me today. With these new charges, they're recommending Karen be held without bail until trial, and they're pushing for a much harsher sentence. Now possibly 5 to 10 years in prison instead of the 1 to 3 years the embezzlement charges carried." But I said fiercely, "She deserves it." "I agree," Barbara said. "But Sarah, I'm scared. What if somehow she gets out? What if she comes after you next? You're the one who discovered her fraud. She must hate you as much as she hates me." I hadn't really thought about that. I'd been so focused on supporting Barbara and ensuring Karen faced justice that I hadn't considered I might also be a target. "I have security cameras now," I said, trying to sound confident. "And Emma and I are being careful. We'll be fine. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about Barbara's words. What if Karen did somehow get out? What if she came after me or Emma? I got up and double-checked every lock in the house. I made sure my security cameras were working properly. I even moved a baseball bat to my bedroom closet, just in case. Emma noticed my anxiety the next morning. "Mom, you checked the locks like 5 times last night." "I heard you," I sighed. "I'm just being careful." "Honey, you're scared," Emma said bluntly. "Because of what Karen tried to do to Barbara, I couldn't lie to my daughter." "Yes, I'm scared, but I'm also taking precautions. We're going to be fine." Emma hugged me. "We stopped her once. We can stop her again if we have to." I held my daughter close, hoping she was right. The next few weeks were tense. Every unexpected noise made me jump. Every car that drove slowly past our house made me look twice. The freedom and peace I'd felt after exposing Karen's fraud had been replaced by a constant low-level anxiety. Barbara called me regularly to check in. She was experiencing the same fears, despite the police presence at her house. "I hate this," she told me during one call. "I hate that Karen still has this power over us, even locked up in jail. She's stolen my sense of safety." "We can't let her win," I said. "We need to take back our peace of mind." "How?" Barbara asked. "I don't feel safe in my own home anymore." I thought about it. What if we organized something for the neighborhood? A community event that reminds us what we're fighting for, our sense of community and safety. Barbara was quiet for a moment. "That's actually a wonderful idea. Spring is... What about a neighborhood cleanup day followed by a community barbecue? We could make it about reclaiming our neighborhood." We spent the next week planning. We sent out flyers to every house. We organized teams to clean up common areas, plant flowers, and spruce up the community entrance. We arranged for food, games for kids, and music. The response was overwhelming. Over 40 families volunteered to participate. On April 7th, 2024, nearly the entire neighborhood turned out for Meadowbrook Heights Renewal Day, as we'd named it. People worked together, cleaning, planting, and laughing. Children played in the playground while parents worked nearby. The atmosphere was joyful and hopeful. Everything Karen had tried to destroy. As I watched Emma and her friends painting a mural on the community center, while a beautiful design featuring flowers and homes, with the words, "Our community, our home," I felt something shift inside me. Karen had tried to rule through fear and division, but we'd responded with unity and hope. We'd taken back our neighborhood. That evening, as families gathered for the barbecue, Barbara stood up to make a speech. She'd been reluctant at first, but I'd encouraged her. "Thank you all for coming today," Barbara said, her voice carrying across the crowd. "These past months have been difficult for our community. We've faced conflict, division, and fear. But today shows what we're really made of. Today shows that when we work together, when we support each other, we're stronger than any force that tries to tear us apart." People cheered and applauded. Some wiped away tears. Barbara continued, "I'm grateful to be part of this community. I'm grateful for your trust and support, and I'm especially grateful to those who stood by the truth when it would have been easier to look away." She looked directly at me. Sarah Mitchell showed incredible courage in exposing wrongdoing. "She reminds us all that ordinary people can make extraordinary differences." Moria Pluse. I felt my face flush with embarrassment and pride as the sun set on our neighborhood gathering. I looked around at my neighbors. At the Rodriguez family playing games with their kids. At the Patels sharing homemade food. At Mr. Henderson chatting with other elderly residents. At Barbara laughing with a group of longtime neighbors. This was what community meant. This was what we'd been fighting for. Karen's trial was still ahead. There would be more stress, more testimony, more confrontation. But looking around at my neighborhood, united and strong, I knew we would face it together, and we would win. Karen's trial approaches. What will happen in court? Will justice truly be served? Karen's trial was scheduled for April 23rd, 2024. As the date approached, my anxiety grew stronger. I would have to testify about discovering the fraud, about the vandalism, about everything Karen had done. The prosecutor, a sharp woman in her 40s named Amanda Chun, met with Barbara and me several times to prepare us for testimony. She explained what questions would be asked, how Karen's defense attorney might try to discredit us, and what to expect in the courtroom. Karen's lawyer will try to paint you both as vindictive neighbors with a personal grudge. Amanda warned us during one preparation session, they'll claim you fabricated evidence to frame an innocent woman who was simply trying to enforce HOA rules properly. But we have documents, bank records, business registrations, I protested. How can they claim we fabricated all that? They'll try, Amanda said simply. That's their job. Your job is to stay calm. Answer honestly. And don't let them rattle you. The evidence speaks for itself, but your credibility as witnesses matters too. Barbara looked worried. What about the attempted assault charge, the fact that she was found in my backyard with weapons? That's actually our strongest case, Amanda said. The police caught her red-handed violating bail conditions and trespassing with clear intent to harm. Combined with the embezzlement and vandalism charges, we're looking at serious prison time. I'm confident we'll get a conviction. Despite Amanda's confidence, I couldn't shake my nervousness. I'd never testified in court before. The thought of facing Karen again, of having her lawyer interrogate me, made my stomach churn. Emma noticed my stress. Mom, you're going to do great. Just tell the truth. That's all you have to do. When did you become so wise? I asked, hugging her. I learned from watching you stand up to bullies, Emma said simply. The night before the trial, I barely slept. I kept rehearsing my testimony in my head, worrying about every possible question. Finally, around 3 a.m, I gave up on sleep and made coffee. I sat at my kitchen table, looking out at the dark neighborhood. This community had become so important to me. These neighbors, this place, it was worth fighting for. Whatever happened in court tomorrow, I knew I'd done the right thing. The trial began at 9 o'clock on a bright spring morning. The courthouse was an imposing brick building downtown. Barbara and I arrived together, both dressed conservatively. Barbara in a navy suit, me in a dark gray dress. A surprising number of neighbors had come to show support. Bill Rodriguez was there with his wife Maria. The Patels came. Even old Mr. Henderson, who rarely left his house, showed up. Linda Park and Mike Stevens from the HOA board sat in the back row. I can't believe so many people came, Barbara whispered to me as we took our seats. They're here because they care, I whispered back, because they know what's at stake. Karen entered the courtroom flanked by 2 guards. She wore an orange jumpsuit. She'd been denied bail after being caught in Barbara's backyard. She looked thinner than I remembered, her face pale and drawn. Her blonde hair, usually perfectly styled, hung limply around her face. For a moment, our eyes met. The hatred in her gaze made me shiver. Even now, facing serious criminal charges, Karen's eyes blazed with fury and blame. Her lawyer, a well-dressed man named Richard Marsh, sat beside her. He looked expensive and confident, probably costing Karen a fortune. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, named Judge Patricia Morrison, called the court to order. The charges were read: 8 counts of embezzlement, 1 count of vandalism, 1 count of attempted assault, criminal trespass, and violation of bail conditions. How does the defendant plead? Judge Morrison asked. Richard Marsh stood. Not guilty on all counts, Your Honor. The trial proceeded methodically. The prosecution called their first witness, Detective James Martinez, who'd investigated the embezzlement charges. He walked the jury through the evidence: the fraudulent company registration, the payment records, the connection to Karen's sister, Patricia. We contacted Patricia Whitmore in Nevada. Detective Martinez testified. She confirmed she had no knowledge of Premium Landscape Services and had never authorized anyone to use her name for business purposes. She stated her sister Karen must have stolen her personal information to create the fake company. Richard Marsh cross-examined aggressively. Detective, isn't it possible that Patricia Whitmore was actually involved and is now lying to protect herself? No, sir, Detective Martinez said firmly. Patricia Whitmore has alibis for the time periods when the alleged landscaping work supposedly occurred. She was working at her dental practice in Nevada. We verified this with her employer. There's no way she could have been performing landscaping services in this state. But you can't prove my client created this company, can you? Marsh pressed. The company was registered using Karen Whitmore's IP address, Detective Martinez said. We traced the online registration back to her home computer. We also found drafts of the business registration documents on her laptop. Marsh sat down, looking less confident. The prosecution called several more witness-Sutha accountant who'd reviewed the HOA books. A representative from Greenview Landscaping, confirming they'd never heard of premium landscape services. A computer forensics expert who'd analyzed Karen's laptop. Then it was Barbara's turn to testify. I watched nervously as Barbara was sworn in. She looked calm and professional, but I could see her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the Bible. Amanda, Chun walked Barbara through her history with the HOA, Karen's arrival in the neighborhood, the escalating conflicts, and finally, the discovery of the fraudulent payments. When did you first become suspicious of these payments? Amanda asked. When Sarah Mitchell pointed them out to me, Barbara said she noticed they were just under the $500 threshold that would require full board approval. The pattern was too consistent to be coincidental. What did you do then? Sarah and I investigated. We discovered the company was registered to Karen's sister, who lived out of state and worked in a completely different field. It became clear the company didn't actually exist as a legitimate business. Richard Marsh stood for cross-examination. Senora. Chun, isn't it true that you and my client had a contentious relationship from the moment she moved to the neighborhood? We had disagreements about HOA enforcement philosophy, Barbara said carefully, but I treated her fairly and professionally. Really? Marsh pulled out papers. I have records showing you dismissed 27 violation notices that my client filed. 27 times you overruled her professional judgment. Doesn't that sound personal? Those violations were dismissed by board vote, not by me alone, Barbara said firmly. And they were dismissed because they were baseless targeting residents for trivial or non-existent infractions, or were they dismissed because you were protecting your friends? Marsh suggested. Amanda objected. Speculation. Your Honor? Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Marsh, stick to facts. Marsh continued pressing, but Barbara held her ground. She answered every question calmly and honestly. By the time she stepped down, I could see the jury looked convinced by her testimony. Then it was my turn. My legs felt weak as I walked to the witness stand. I was sworn in, my voice barely above a whisper as I promised to tell the truth. Amanda Chun smiled encouragingly at me. Ms. Mitchell, please tell the court how you first became involved in this situation. I took a deep breath and began my testimony. I explained about my garden, the violation notices, the escalating harassment. I described discovering the suspicious payments and deciding to investigate. What motivated you to investigate the HOA finances? Amanda asked. Karen had been accusing Barbara of financial mismanagement, I said. But I knew Barbara was honest and meticulous. I wondered if Karen's accusations were projection, if she was guilty of what she was accusing others of doing. And what did you discover? I found that Premium Landscape Services was registered to Patricia Whitmore, Karen's sister. Further research showed Patricia lived in Nevada and worked as a dental hygienist. She couldn't possibly be running a landscaping company in our state. What did you do with this information? I documented everything and brought it to Barbara. We decided to set a trap at the next board meeting. I explained our plan to propose a payment to Premium Landscape Services and how Karen had fallen right into the trap, unable to explain the fraudulent company when confronted. Then came the part I'd been dreading, Richard Marsh's cross-examination. Marsh stood, looking at me with barely concealed disdain. Miss Mitchell, you have quite the imagination, don't you? You teach English, correct? Yes, I teach high school English. So you're skilled at creating narratives, telling stories. I saw where he was going. I teach literature and writing. Yes, but I don't create false narratives. Don't you? Marsh pulled out papers. You received 4 violation notices from my client over a 6-month period. 4 times she cited legitimate concerns about your property, and 4 times you fought those citations. That must have made you angry. The violations were baseless, I said. They were dismissed by the board because they had no merit, or because you convinced your friend Barbara to dismiss them, Marsh suggested. Isn't this whole case just revenge for those violation notices? You and Ms. Chun decided to frame my client for fraud because she was doing her job enforcing HOA rules that you didn't like. Amanda objected before I could answer. Your Honor, Mr. Marsh is testifying, not questioning. Sustained, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Marsh, ask questions. Don't make speeches. Marsh turned back to me. Ms. Mitchell, did you or did you not have a personal grudge against Karen Whit? I didn't have a grudge, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. I had concerns about her harassment of multiple neighbors, including myself. When I discovered evidence of fraud, I had a responsibility to report it. Convenient that you just happened to discover this alleged fraud right when your friend was being investigated for mismanagement. The timing wasn't convenient, I said. It was necessary. And the fraud is real, not alleged. The evidence is in the bank records, the business registration, Karen's own laptop. Those are facts, not stories. Marsh continued trying to shake my testimony, but I held firm. Amanda had prepared me well. Every time Marsh tried to twist my words, I calmly corrected him and returned to the facts. Finally, Marsh gave up and sat down. I stepped off the witness stand feeling drained but relieved. I'd done it. I'd told the truth, clearly and calmly. Over the next 2 days, the prosecution presented more witnesses than Aba, who'd seen Karen in Barbara's backyard, the police officers who'd arrested her, evidence of the items found in Karen's bag. The most damaging testimony came from a forensic psychologist who'd evaluated materials found in Karen's home. They'd discovered notebooks filled with Karen's handwriting pages and pages detailing her surveillance of Barbara, her hatred toward me and other neighbors, her plans for revenge. The defendant showed clear signs of obsessive behavior. The psychologist testified. Her writings indicate she blamed others for her legal problems and was planning escalating acts of retaliation. Then it was the defense's turn. Marsh called Karen's sister Patricia as a witness, clearly hoping to create reasonable doubt about her involvement. But Patricia Whitmore was a disaster for the defense. She appeared via video link from Nevada, looking nervous and uncomfortable. Senora Whitmore, did you create or have any knowledge of premium landscape services? Marsh asked. No, absolutely not, Patricia said. I didn't even know about it until the police contacted me. I was shocked that someone used my name. Is it possible you gave your sister permission to use your name and simply forgot? Marsh suggested. Patricia looked offended. No. Karen and I haven't been close in years. We barely talk. She certainly never asked to use my name for anything, and I would never have agreed to something like that. Marsh tried to continue, but Patricia became increasingly defensive, clearly upset that anyone would suggest she was involved in fraud. The defense ended her testimony quickly. Karen herself didn't testify. Marsh advised her not to take the stand, probably knowing the prosecution would destroy her credibility with questions about the evidence found on her laptop and in her home. Closing arguments came on April 26th. Amanda Chun stood before the jury and methodically walked through every piece of evidence: the fake company, the payments, the laptop records, the surveillance notes, the attempted assault. Karen Whitmore didn't just steal money, Amanda said. She terrorized an entire neighborhood. She harassed residents for petty reasons. She vandalized property. She planned violence against a woman who'd done nothing but serve her community faithfully. The evidence is overwhelming and undeniable. Karen Whitmore is guilty, and she needs to be held accountable. Marsh gave an impassioned defense, arguing reasonable doubt, suggesting Barbara and I had framed Karen, claiming Karen was the real victim of a neighborhood conspiracy. But watching the jury's faces, I could tell they weren't buying it. The evidence was too strong, too clear. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Barbara and I waited in the courthouse hallway with our neighbors, barely speaking, just waiting. Finally, At 4:30 in the afternoon, we were called back. The jury had reached a verdict. We filed back into the courtroom. Karen sat at the defense table, her face pale and expressionless. Her hands were clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Morrison asked. The jury foreman, a middle-aged man in a blue suit, stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of embezzlement in the first degree, how do you find guilty?" Barbara grabbed my hand and squeezed. I could barely breathe. The foreman continued through all the charges. "Guilty, guilty, guilty, every single count." Karen's face crumpled. She put her head in her hands and began crying. No, not crying, sobbing. Loud, gasping sobs that echoed through the courtroom. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, only a deep sense of relief. Justice had been served. Judge Morrison set sentencing for May 15th and remanded Karen to custody until then. Guards led her away, still crying, as she looked back at the courtroom with an expression of total devastation. Outside the courthouse, Barbara and I were surrounded by jubilant neighbors. Bill Rodriguez hugged us both. "You did it. You actually did it." "We all did it," Barbara said, tears streaming down her face. This was about all of us standing together. Local news crews wanted interviews, but we declined. This wasn't about publicity. It was about our community healing and moving forward. That evening, several neighbors gathered at Barbara's house for an impromptu celebration. Nothing fancy, juiced pizza, sodas, and relief that our nightmare was finally over. Emma came with me, and I watched her laughing with neighbors' kids, playing in Barbara's backyard as the sun set. This was what we'd fought for, the freedom for our families to live in peace. "Thank you," Barbara said quietly, standing beside me on her porch, "for everything." "We saved each other," I reminded her. "That's what neighbors do." Sentencing is still ahead. What punishment will Karen face? And can the neighborhood truly heal from everything that happened? The weeks between Karen's conviction and sentencing felt surreal. Life in Meadowbrook Heights slowly returned to normal. Children played outside freely. Neighbors chatted without fear. The oppressive atmosphere Karen had created gradually lifted. But May 5th, Barbara seemed lighter than she'd been in months. At our HOA meeting on May 3rd, she received a standing ovation. "I'm just glad this is behind us," Barbara said. "Now we can focus on building a strong, supportive community." The meeting was productive and enjoyable. We discussed summer activities, voted on playground improvements, and approved the pool budget. It felt wonderfully mundane after months of drama. Mike Stevens made a formal motion apologizing to Barbara for ever doubting her. It passed unanimously. "I also want to recognize Sarah Mitchell," Mike added. "Without her courage, we might never have discovered the truth." I felt my face flush as people applauded. "I just did what anyone should do," I said. After the meeting, Jennifer Davies approached me. She'd defended Karen on Facebook earlier. "I'm so sorry I doubted you," Jennifer sighed. Karen seemed so professional. I should have looked deeper. "It's okay," I said. "Karen fooled a lot of people." The night before sentencing, Barbara called. "Are you attending tomorrow?" "Yes. You. I need to, for closure. But I'm nervous." "We'll sit together," I offered. The sentencing hearing began at 10 o'clock. Barbara and I sat in the second row. Karen was brought in, looking thin and haggard, her blonde hair showing dark roots. Judge Morrison reviewed the case. "This court has received several letters regarding sentencing." Prosecutor Amanda Chun stood. "Your Honor, the state recommends the maximum sentence." Karen Whitmore showed no remorse. She terrorized a neighborhood, stole from families, and planned violence. She poses a genuine threat. Karen's lawyer argued for mercy. "My client is a first-time offender who made mistakes under stress. She's lost everything." Judge Morrison looked at Karen. "Does the defendant wish to speak?" Karen stood shakily. "I know I made mistakes. I let anger control me. I never meant for things to go so far. I'm sorry." It was the first time I'd heard Karen apologize, but it felt hollow, forced by circumstances. Judge Morrison's expression remained stern. "Ms. Whitmore, your crimes weren't mistakes. They were calculated and escalating. You created a fake company to steal. You harassed residents. You vandalized property. Most seriously, you planned violence." Karen's head dropped. "Based on the severity of your crimes and the danger you pose, I sentence you as follows. On 8 counts of embezzlement, 3 years per count, concurrent. On vandalism, 1 year concurrent. On attempted assault, 5 years consecutive. Total sentence, 8 years in state prison, with parole eligibility after 6 years. 8 years! Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing. "Additionally, you must pay full restitution of $5,200. You will have no contact with any Meadowbrook Heights residents upon release. Violation will result in additional charges." Guards led Karen away. "Assez passé." She looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes. Outside, Barbara and I stood in the sunshine, breathing deeply. "It's really over," Barbara said. 8 years. "Justice was served," I said. Amanda Chun approached. Judge Morrison saw through the defense. Karen got what she deserved. "Thank you for everything," Barbara said. "You two did the hard part," Amanda replied. "You had the courage to expose the truth." Barbara turned to me. "What do we do now?" "Now we go home and live our lives," I smiled. "We enjoy our neighborhood." That's what this was all about. That evening, Barbara organized a neighborhood gathering at the community pool. Nearly 75 people showed up. The atmosphere was celebratory. I sat with Emma, watching neighbors laugh freely. The Rodriguez kids played in the pool. The Patels brought samosas. Mr. Henderson shared neighborhood stories. Barbara stood to speak. "Thank you for your support during these difficult months. Today, justice was served. Karen received 8 years. But more importantly, our community proved we're stronger together." People applauded. Someone shouted, "3 cheers for Barbara." "I also want to recognize Sarah Mitchell," Barbara continued. "Sarah showed incredible courage." "Would you stand?" Reluctantly, I stood as people applauded. "I didn't do it for recognition," I said. "I did it because this community matters. Standing up to Bullies is always the right thing to do." As the sun set, I reflected on everything. 9 months ago, my biggest concern was my tomato plants. Then Karen arrived and turned our neighborhood into a battleground. But we'd fought back. We'd stood up to intimidation and exposed criminal behavior. We'd faced fear and danger and won. We'd learned that communities are only as strong as their willingness to stand together. That silence enables bullies. That ordinary people can make extraordinary differences. Karen was gone, locked away. The healing had begun. Neighbors spoke freely again. Families who'd considered moving decided to stay. My vegetable garden flourished that summer. Emma and I shared the harvest, and other families started gardens. What had been a conflict became community connection. Barbara continued as HOA president, re-elected unanimously. Meadowbrook Heights became known as a model community. I returned to my simple life as a teacher and mother. But I was changed. I'd discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. Emma learned those lessons too. She became more confident, more willing to speak up against injustice. Years later, people still ask about the Karen situation. They want to know how I found courage, how I managed fear, whether I have regrets. My answer is always the same. When you see something wrong, you have a choice. Look away and hope someone else deals with it. Or stand up and fight back knowing it might be hard, knowing you might face retaliation, but doing it because it's right. I chose to fight back. Barbara chose to fight back. Our neighbors supported us. Together, we took back our community. That's the day I fought back against HOA. Bullies! And I'd do it again without hesitation. Because some fights are worth having. Some battles need to be fought. And sometimes, ordinary people like teachers and retired architects are exactly the heroes a community needs. Karen learned that lesson the hard way. She thought she could bully without consequences. She thought people would be too afraid to resist. She was wrong. And now she had 8 years to think about her mistakes. Meanwhile, in Meadowbrook Heights, life went on peaceful, happy, and free, exactly as it should be.